Welcome back to the Afternoon Snack Podcast. I'm Meredith here with Alex, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Alex's mom, Brenda, which is actually her Instagram handle, if you'd like to follow along. She's got a really interesting story about nutrition and fitness in her in her own life, and we talk about it a lot, like off the cuff, and we wanted to share the story for a while. So we figure new podcast equipment. There's no better episode, I think, to start with than Brenda's.
Okay, so surprisingly enough, she has her own identity other than my mom. So I'll just give you some statistics to give you a bit of a background, and then she'll dive deeper. So she retired about 3 years ago from practicing law, which she was doing for about 30 years. She's run 4 marathons. She's an avid skier and golfer. She's been doing strength and conditioning with Optimum Performance for about 5 years. She, in those 5 years, had made some really great fitness gains. She's did her first strict muscle up of April last year. We were there to witness that. Came along with a lot of dancing and smiling and jumping up and down.
Wait, did you say strict muscle up or strict pull up?
Oh, I think I said muscle up.
I'll take it.
She's like not going to correct that. She's like, yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was amazing.
First strict pull up. Now she's doing weighted pull-ups up to 10 pounds. Her shoulder press is 95 pounds, front squat 150, deadlift 235, and she's proud to say that she can ascend a rope several times in a workout without needing EMS to come save her, which I think makes both me and my coach very happy, our coach.
Probably.
Yeah, so I think if you could just give us a bit of a background on like kind of how you grew up, a little bit on your self-esteem and your relationship with food, kind of starting back when you can remember it being relevant.
So I grew up with a mom who was great, but very focused on image and stuff. So that kind of played into things a little bit. Also Ukrainian background, so everything was about food. Not to blame anything, it was just the way it was, and we were rewarded with food. If we felt sad, we were given food, and I think you probably recall having been raised that way as well. And as far as self-esteem, pretty much had none, and that had an effect, of course, on relationship with food, or not of course, but it can, and it did with me. And so probably from about the age of 12, 13, I would say as far back as I can, that's as far back as I can recall, having started to struggle with body image issues and self-esteem, all that kind of thing. And 13-ish was probably the first time that I started dieting, and it was like my own thing. I think it was like oranges and carrots until my skin turned orange, and basically spent up until I was about 48 years old trying every diet under the sun, and basically yo-yo dieting, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, getting pregnant, gaining a lot of weight. And
like how much weight?
So probably the heaviest I was getting up and down was probably maybe 165 pounds. And with both of my pregnancies, I was over 200. Proud to say none of that was water gain. That was as they say, it was a license to eat. And I look at women now who basically are pregnant, who look like normal people with a baby inside them, and I basically looked like a normal person with about 7 babies in me. So that was that, and also not the healthiest person in the world. I also started smoking around 13, and pretty much spent my youth smoking and drinking, which I'm very proud of. And that continued on through up until after I had children, except I wasn't smoking through my pregnancies, but did light up on the way to the hospital.
I feel like that's fair.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, at that point.
So do you mind if I say what, like your height and your weight and your age, just to give people?
Sure.
Okay, so you're about, what, 140?
Yeah.
You're how old?
61.
61 and about 5'6".
6.
Okay. Just to give you an idea when you talk about weight.
And she eats more than 2,100 calories a day.
Yeah.
Most days.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you talk about like your self-esteem, like what kind of issues did you have? Like what was it with your body or your self-esteem or?
Just everything really. A big focus on legs and ass. I think I was probably about 15 years old. I remember somebody called me Thunder Thighs, and that was the last time I wore shorts for a very long time. And I think I'm a fairly athletic person, but missed all of that through my youth, mainly because I just didn't have the confidence to put myself out there. Fear of failure, all that kind of stuff, especially anything physical. So even in my early 20s, I was in university, and I remember probably 4 years of undergrad not having spent a day in public without a long sweater or a jacket covering my butt. And just that kind of thing where you're just constantly self-conscious about what you look like, how fat you look, all that kind of thing, comparing yourself to your friends. I had a really good looking girlfriend who had like everything going for her, tiny waist, and she had these nice boobs and everything. And just to make myself feel better, I convinced her that she had very fat ankles. And so to my knowledge, she's still struggling with that to this day. Again, something else I'm very proud of.
Just to clarify, my mom uses the word girlfriend as in like a friend who's a girl.
Oh yeah.
Not like an actual girlfriend.
Yeah.
That we know of.
Yeah. She wasn't my partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a better term. What created a lot of the anxieties at that time? Were they different than what create anxieties for people now, or is it kind of the same?
I think there's more pressure now. I'm guessing that they're the same. I feel like a lot of it was just self-imposed. Like I'm not sure exactly where it came from. I mean, I grew up in a generation where all our moms were dieting all the time, and they were doing these, they were exercising and talking about how they looked, and they had to sit. So I think a lot of that, there was that subconsciously. And as I say, I think there's just a ton more pressure now. Because with social media and everything, it's a lot different. But I think it was just that. I think it was just a generational thing.
Yeah, seems to be. We get a lot of clients who are around our age, and we hear stories from them about their relationship with their mom, or not even relationship, just like watching the way that their parents are, the way that specifically their mom was with food, and it creates. I think it can create a lot of anxiety in children that maybe parents don't realize. And I think people are becoming more aware of it now, but that's definitely a pattern that we see, right?
Yeah.
So when you had having Alex change anything for you, or just the way that you were outwardly, about your own diet or nutrition?
Sorry, having Alex, like when I gave birth to her? Like when I, what do you mean?
Like, did it change did it change the way that you thought about nutrition, or even about yourself?
No.
Huh.
No. I both pregnancies, I was very big, lost weight after, got very thin, and just continued on the same cycle.
So what was the turning point then for you?
So the turning point for me, I was around 48 years old, and maybe too much information, but I went through early menopause at that point. And after having gone through every diet under the sun for years and years.
Let's talk about that first.
Oh, those are good ones.
Let just maybe highlight like 3 of the most memorable diets.
Okay, so one of the most memorable was Weight Watchers. And that's memorable because I must have done it 6 or 8 times. Changed over the years, started back in the day when you were eating like 12 or 1,400 calories.
When did you first do that? Like how old were you?
Oh, I was probably before you were born, so maybe kind of mid-20s or something, late 20s, I'm not sure. But back at that time, like I say, the calorie consumption was pretty low. It was really hard to be nice, which explains a lot of the way I raised you.
So you said like 1,200 calories a day?
1,214 at that time, and then over the years it grew. They increased. I don't know what they are now, but it did get more reasonable over time. But I mean, you were pretty much hungry all the time. And even that, I had a really bad attitude. I'd start losing weight. And then when I went for my weigh-in, I probably wouldn't drink any water for 2 days just to make sure I was, as light as possible. And then I would leave the meeting happy that I'd lost some weight. And I would hear the bulk bins from Safeway across the street calling my name, and I'd go over there and fill up with jujubes. So Weight Watchers I turned to, as I say, probably half a dozen times over the years.
So what happened there? Like you would lose weight and then you would quit, or like get off track?
Yeah, and then you wouldn't follow the maintenance stuff, which probably wouldn't matter anyway. But basically, I was a binge eater. So I think from what I've learned, I'm no expert, but from what I learned about binge eating, it's a pattern which starts with kind of a restriction thing, and you restrict, you control, and then you just lose it. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of anxiety related, and you just eat, and some people are worse than others. Didn't realize that until years and years later, after I'd kind of gotten control of things, when your sister kind of started experiencing that same sort of thing, and the light went on, and I thought, oh, maybe I don't really just super like food more than anybody else, and that it was like a thing. So that was Weight Watchers. And then one of the most memorable ones, I was a real jujube thing. I quit smoking.
What are jujubes? Because those are not a thing in...
I don't know. Whatever they, like American, what would they be like? They're like...
They're kind of like Swedish berries.
Yeah.
But like all different flavors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I love that kind of thing. And I quit smoking when the kids were young. And I went directly from cigarettes to jujubes.
When did you start smoking?
When I was 13. So I smoked for... about 20 years, very heavily at times. When I was practicing law, we were still allowed to smoke in our offices, and there was a lot of smoking going on. I was at one point up to 2 packs a day, to the point where I couldn't have a good laugh without coughing like an old man. And again, something very proud of. Anyway, one of the best diets I was on was the Zone diet, which was kind of like, I don't remember the specifics, but when you put stuff on your plate, it was like 30% meat and 40% something else, like vegetables, and then 30% other carbs, something like that.
Yeah, it works in blocks.
Yeah. So I would always have a jujube block. So I would actually sit down at dinner with the kids and my husband, and I'd have my plate, and I'd have like 3 things, and one plate was filled with jujubes.
Is that the same as like the CrossFit Zone?
It's the same, yeah. So Zone was adopted early on with CrossFit, I think, because like CrossFit came about in like the early 2000s. Okay. That was like a big Zone time. Yeah. That was when Zone was really popular. So I think it was just adopted as a way to sort of play with the paleo diet. Like you do paleo Zone and a way to control. Like Zone, you control intake, but only if you know how to do it. And it still lacks the educational component.
Yeah. And obviously food quality component.
Yeah, because like how the hell do you go out to eat with the Zone diet? Yeah. You're like, excuse me, waiter. Can you tell me how many blocks of it's in this?
That's what
chicken piccata? Like,
yeah.
You have no idea.
Yeah. Did you ever do the Atkins diet?
I did the Atkins diet. Of course I did. I also did some fruit diet that my mother gave me.
Did you do any like juice cleanses?
Nothing like that. Okay. Never did anything like that. But the Atkins diet, I got very skinny very fast. And I think I stopped pooping, and also lost hair. Started losing hair, and that was not a good diet. Apparently there were a lot of people, because the fiber content is so low, that a lot of people had problems with their colon and stuff, like serious problems. But with me, it was all about the scale. It was all about the size of my clothes, but mostly the scale, which I would get on 10 times a day. It would completely dictate my mood for the day. If I got on and I had a light morning, I'd be ecstatic and I think, I could eat. And then if I got on and I was heavy, I'd be totally depressed and I'd eat because I was depressed. It was just a really vicious cycle for a very long, very, very long time. And except when we had kids, I said to my husband, we will not. I just knew in my heart this was wrong. And I said, we will not be discussing weight. And I got rid of my scale for quite a few years because I just didn't. But, I had a very self-deprecating sense of humor. And I think kids just pick up on stuff. Like they know. They pick up and on what you're doing.
Yeah.
It was pretty unhealthy.
And there was no realization when you had like a light day on the scale, there was no like understanding that was like artificial.
Didn't care.
It didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
It didn't matter if like
mattered.
if you like intentionally didn't drink water for the second half of the day before. Yeah. So I think that's like, we see that all the time. Like when we get new people, right? We get weight updates all the time, and like they'll fluctuate by maybe 2 pounds a day or something. And it's like, you didn't actually gain 2 pounds, or you didn't actually like lose 2 pounds. It's highly unlikely. But I think people are so tied to the scale that they like in their logical selves, they know that, but there's so much emotion tied to that number that you just lose all sense of logic when you get on it. I mean, you weigh yourself every day, right?
Yeah.
How do you find that?
I mean, I keep a lot of data points. So I have like my scale, and then what macros I hit the previous day, how hungry I was, how many hours of sleep that I slept, how many hours of sleep. And then I also keep track of like how my digestion was.
How much your hair grew overnight.
Get the ruler out.
No, because I had some indigestion problems, so I rank that on a scale just so I can, if it's an 8 and I'm talking to somebody about it, like my naturopath, and I'm like, okay, on that day 8, I had like a big bowl of spaghetti, and it's like, okay, maybe it's a tomato sauce. So it's just like, you know.
And you also like, you also weigh your poop, right? Like when you go to you poop on a scale, and
she brings it here and I do that.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay.
No, but I don't like, a lot of people now with the diet culture, and like there's a lot of like self-love, and like you know, I have clients that I tell them like, weigh yourself every Friday. It's a really good data point. But I also have clients where I'm like, don't weigh yourself, like put the scale away. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that more, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the scale. Like I don't associate a number to my, like I don't get emotional over the number. If I weigh like 2 pounds heavier one day, I'm like, whether it's like I'm on my period, or I just maybe had a dinner out with a lot of salt, like I don't know. But I don't look at it, and that doesn't dictate my day. That doesn't make me angry or sad or frustrated. It's like, that's a data point. I think part of it is I've been doing it for so long that I can see like when there's an actual change, and that's over the course of like a month.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I still weigh myself every day, but I don't have that emotional attachment. For me, it's almost more of a habit, and also just keeping track, like just sort of keeping track. But I don't get upset about it anymore. It doesn't dictate what I eat or how I feel or anything like that. So over the years, I've gotten past that.
So how did that change for you? Like, what was the turning point there?
So the turning point for me, as I say, I was in my late 40s, and I don't know if it maybe had something to do with hormonal change. It maybe did, maybe didn't. But I just reached a point in my life where I thought to myself, like, this is what it is. And leave the door open for the cat. I just sort of decided to try to accept what I had, what my body looked like. And also I just reached a point where I thought, I cannot measure another piece of food ever again. Like I was so tired of it. And just around that time, I found a book. It was actually through Oprah Winfrey, which, not that I sit around and watch TV. I watch CNN now all the time. But I happened to come across this book. It was Oprah Winfrey's Trainer. And it long story short, for the first time in my life, I had patience to lose weight. I was probably around 160, 165 pounds. I dropped down to about maybe 135 pounds. But the way it worked is for a month, all you did was eat like 3 meals a day and a couple of snacks. Didn't matter what you ate. It was just to get you back into the habit of, and then you started changing your diet. And in fact, mine didn't have to change that much. It was a great increase in fiber. I wasn't eating a lot of like really fatty foods or anything like that. So I didn't have to make a lot of changes. But it was calorie based, and it was pretty reasonable. I think it was 1,800 or 1,900 calories based on the exercise I was doing. And after that first month, then you start following that. And after that first month, I lost 1.5 to 2 pounds per week, like clockwork. I wasn't hungry. I was probably eating more than I had ever eaten before. And on the weekends, if we went out or something, I would ignore the whole thing. And as I say, it was the first time in my life that I just was patient about it. And I thought, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I've pretty much maintained that weight since then. And over the years, my binging has, 3 years later, I thought to myself, man, the last time that I binged on, 2 bags of potato chips has been several years. So it's been slow progress. And you don't realize it, but you all of a sudden you sort of look back and you think, I haven't done anything like that for a very long time. And it's a really great feeling because it had food had almost as much control over me as smoking did, which was a lot.
Yeah.
When you say like you were eating like 18 or 1900 calories and it was like more than you were ever eating, do you think you were actually, I mean, obviously you were actually eating less, but it was probably, and we hear this all the time. We put people on macros or calories that are around 18 or 1900, like completely reasonable. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's so much food. But really over the course of like a week or a month without the 3 or 4 days of restriction and then a binge day or like a bad weekend.
So like your rolling average is lower, but your perception of what you're eating, you like in your head, you're like, I'm eating more because those restricted days are completely gone.
Yeah.
Because I think you're like your brain, you compartmentalize a little bit. So you don't like to think like I'm a binger and like I go complete, I eat like 4,000 or 5,000 calories on the weekend. Like no one likes to think that. They put that away and they think, okay, I only eat 1,400 or 1,500 calories during the week, and they think that's their diet. So when they're consistently eating 1,800 or 1,900 and you're eating like whole foods that are fibrous and very filling, like you're going to feel like you are eating more.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you say that because when I say I was eating more than I had been eating, I think I'm thinking I was eating more than I had been eating on my low days
when you were intentionally dieting.
Yeah.
So you remove that restriction, which allows you to like more sustainably be in the calorie deficit. And also you remove the restriction, that crazy restriction, which probably in the end gets rid of some of the binging tendencies. Mm-hmm. So it's like twofold.
Yeah.
Would you say eating the 3 square meals and eating like 1,800 or 1,900 calories for that like long period of time and losing weight, were you losing weight much slower than you were on the previous diets?
Absolutely.
Do you think that had to do with like the fact that this was more sustainable?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We preach that a lot, so I just...
Yeah.
But a lot of it was just, it took a long time, but it was more, that was kind of something that got me going. But the maintaining it was more up here, like changing my attitude toward myself. And it's not like I look at myself and think, you are so awesome. Oh my God, look at this body. It's not like that. Just FYI for future reference. But it's more, and I still have areas that I focus on that I kind of, I tell you.
Well, you'll always ask like, hey, like, is it like, can I be wearing a two-piece bathing suit like in public still? It's like, yeah,
because we want the beach to ourselves.
No, but seriously, like, I think you look great, but I think always in your head you're gonna have like, it's gonna be a work in progress in terms of the self-esteem issue.
Yeah.
Like you see people walking down the beach and you're like, wow, if they can wear a two-piece, and I'm not being rude here, just like everyone thinks it, like if that person can wear a two-piece, why can't I? And it's because you look at yourself in such a negative light sometimes.
Yeah.
That
you don't realize like no one actually cares.
No.
Like no one cares. You care maybe because of like whatever you have going on in your head. But I think most people, like your family and your friends, like they just want you to do whatever makes you happy. And if wearing a two-piece on the beach makes you happy, then you should do that.
But also when you see people walking down the beach, and I find especially European women, because they expose a lot and they could be like 70 years old and a lot heavier than I am. I'm not necessarily judging them. And I'm thinking, well, why would I judge myself? And who cares? Like, and then I'm sitting by these guys usually, so... Nobody's looking at me. But it is a lot. It's a lot it is in your head, and it's something that I think you have to consistently work on.
So let's talk about your fitness.
Yeah, like how your most recent fitness endeavors have changed your.
Well, like back, I remember as a kid, you were like running a lot and then doing something in the basement. What was that? And how did that kind of play in with like, a lot of people, fitness and nutrition kind of go hand in hand. Like they'll use fitness to make up for nutrition. Like, they'll burn calories to eat calories. Like, did that ever, like I remember like you've talked about training for a marathon and you actually gained weight.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, like what you were doing for fitness and how that kind of impacted your nutrition.
I started running. I didn't, as I say, I wasn't doing a lot of fitnessing and stuff until I married your dad, who at the time was an elite level distance runner. And basically that's all I knew was running and all these people running ridiculous distances. So I don't remember what got me going. It was before kids. And I remember the very first time we went for a run and I lasted 9 minutes until I was and I was still smoking at the time. So that was helpful. And so just started running very slowly. And then one day.
What inspired you to run a marathon?
So what inspired me, again, I go back to Oprah.
I love this story. Actually, I'll just interject here. When we were kids, we would come home from school at like 3:30. School would end at like 3. We'd get on the bus and be home by like 3:30. And every night, I think it was 5, you would come home and Oprah would have to come on right away.
Yeah, I liked Oprah.
Yeah, and we didn't. It was like, ugh.
I mean, I watched Oprah.
I ended up watching it.
Yeah,
it was
great.
on.
But a lot of it was educational. Anyway, so I had been watching Oprah at the time, and my husband Garth used to get Runner's World magazine. And one night we were lying in bed, and he said, "Oh, look at this." And I remember exactly where it was on the page and everything. And it was a short little article about Oprah Winfrey having run a half marathon, and she was training for a marathon. And I think it was that military one. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway.
The Marine one?
I think it was the Marine Corps marathon or something. Yeah. And I read this article and I looked at my husband and I said, if she can drag her ass 26 miles, I can drag my ass 26 miles. And so trained for this marathon. And of course, he was running actually 80 to 100 miles per week. I was not training for a marathon. And I just thought, again, this is just a license to eat. And I was eating as much as he was. Which was quite a bit. So I ended up running this marathon a little heavier than when I started training for it. And I ran a marathon. I've never been a great runner. I just I've never had that runner's high, generally a runner's low. And I think my fastest was around 4 hours and 30 minutes. So I'm by no means a great runner or anything, but that was my first marathon. And I remember it was in Victoria. And I was wearing contact lenses at the time, and I almost lost my contact lenses because when the gun went off, I started to cry, and I just couldn't believe I was doing this. I just couldn't believe it. And then as soon as the marathon was over, we went out and bought jujubes.
Of course. What else?
So, yeah.
That was before you lost
Yeah. That was before kids. And then after that, when you guys were young, I think because of your dad's influence and a couple other things. So a lot of it was running, but then a lot of it was basement stuff. I had one of those step things, and I used to do Kathy Smith workouts down there. So I would say I kept in kind of okay shape over the years as much as I could, and sometimes was very early in the morning or late at night or whatever. And that's kind of what I was doing until about 9 years ago, I guess. Started getting a bit more intense.
Intense in like the type of training?
The type of training, the amount of stuff that I was doing. So we went through a rather emotional time about 9 years ago. Lost Alex's younger sister and my mom within 6 weeks of each other, and it was a tough time. And we basically turned to exercise. In fact, even when her sister was sick. She was really into running and very much athletic like Alex.
My sister had this goal when she was 6. She was like, when I'm better, I'm going to run, because she had never run a marathon, just halves. And she was a great runner. She ran some fast halves. She was like, I'm going to run I'm going to run a marathon when we're done. And I know she was going to run the San Francisco Nike Women's Marathon. And there was a reason behind it. And it was because when you got to the finish line, there was a firefighter who would give you a Tiffany necklace as a finishing medal. So that was like what she was going to do when she was better. And by that time, you had kind of stopped running.
Oh yeah, I hadn't run a marathon in 15 years, and I said I'd never do one again because every step is painful for me.
Yeah,
it was horrible. But we did do that marathon. Actually, we raised $83,000, the three of us, in support of leukemia and lymphoma research.
Well, I think because after she passed away, I was like, I'm gonna run the marathon, and then my dad was like, I'm gonna run it too, and so you were like, well, shit.
I guess I'm running the marathon.
And then we didn't get in. So we didn't get in the lottery because so many people sign up. So we signed up and if you're ever interested in running a marathon, this is an awesome way to do it. You run through Team in Training, which is like a cancer fundraising society, and you have to raise a certain minimum.
But I don't think the minimum is that high.
It's not.
It's like a couple $1,000s maybe.
Yeah. And they pay for you. You get in to the race you want, and I think in some instances will pay for your flight and your accommodation,
depending on how much you raise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we had a pretty sad story, but we raised how much? 85,000?
83,000.
83,000 as a family. So we were like, they were like giving us presents and stuff. We got these like Nike running shoes that were like Tiffany's, like designed as
like Tiffany colors.
Yeah, and like they had ribbons as shoelaces and stuff. But that was a rough marathon. A lot of hills in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was about 8 years ago.
Yeah, 2012.
I had just kind of started CrossFit back then.
That was the last marathon that you ran.
The only one.
The only one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then so after, and what marathon was that your last one?
That was my last one. I'm pretty sure I won't ever do one again. This
never
time
say
for
never.
sure.
Yeah.
It was really, I can't even describe it. I was at physio every week training for that thing. But anyway, we kind of went crazy. That was sort of the way that we maintained our mental health, or so we thought. And we would just move from marathon training, like it got up to 20 miles on a Sunday. I would start a couple of hours before Alex and her dad, so in the hopes that I got home at around the same time. And then we would do like 75 minutes, super hot yoga, like power yoga stuff. And then we'd be on the golf course carrying our bags for 18, like we were crazy.
Not anymore though.
And then Alex kind of got us interested in CrossFit, and we went to a few classes, and it was pretty exciting. Like I remember the first time I'd never jumped on a box before, and it was a max box jump thing, and Alex happened to be at that class, and she kept telling me I had more room, and I remember I jumped up to 26 inches, and I just felt like I could take over the world. And the next day I was in the office, and our CFO, I went into his office, and I used to wear really high heels, and I was like, guess what I did yesterday? And I was like, dare me. I will jump on your desk right here, right now. It was really exciting, but I didn't know my limits. I have very poor mobility in my shoulders and a couple of other areas. And I ended up really hurting myself. And then I was diagnosed with fairly severe adrenal fatigue, which made things hurt a lot more. So finally just packed it in, and the doctors, I had a medical / homeopath doctor who told me to stop running. We were also doing 90-minute spin classes on Sundays, and going hard, the three of us. So they said I had to stop all that or I wasn't going to recover, and I had no idea what to do. And that's when I contacted Alex's coach, Mike Fitzgerald, who I didn't know before. Just asked him if he knew anything about this, if he could help me, and he said sure. And so he started programming me. I just started going to our local fitness recreation center, doing light weights based on the programming, and then eventually started building up, and I'd go back to his gym every, few months or whatever to get a new program, and he kind of tests me out. And then I remember the very first day that I did something CrossFit-y, and he was teaching me snatch, and I was like, what? So I started doing some Olympic weightlifting, and then started on rope
That was
climbs.
like five years ago.
Well, yeah, the rope climbing, Olympic lifting was probably more recent than that. But I was still working, and then moved to a CrossFit gym that allowed me to do those things. And they allowed me to do my own programming there. And then 3 years ago, when I retired, I started at Mike's gym, and my programming has gotten much more intense. I'm now up to 6 days a week, and it's but it's intense because I like it, because he knows that it's like, for me, it's like like kind of a hobby. Yeah.
So you retired 3 years ago and then became a professional retired athlete.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
No, it's good. Mike seems to enjoy programming for you.
Oh,
/ picking on you. I
Yeah.
don't know which he enjoys
picked
more,
on a lot.
but
Yeah.
would you say and then how was your nutrition during that time?
So my nutrition was pretty much, had, been pretty stable for a number of years. And then I had talked to Alex a few times about, I kind of knew I was low on protein. Had absolutely zero idea of just how low I was. And
She'd be like, well, I have peanut butter.
I have a tablespoon of
I
peanut
have
butter.
peanut butter in the morning on my toast. I'm like,
And I eat oatmeal.
That is not enough protein. I'm telling you right now.
Peanut butter is a source of fat.
At least it's not what my dad thinks there's protein in grapes.
Well, I had grapes, so.
So I kind of knew I was low on that, but I didn't think it was that big a deal. Anyway, started to have some problems with inflammation, and there was no explanation for it. I would go weeks where my weight was up, my inner thighs would get very swollen. I was quite swollen in here. Had no idea where this was coming from, sought help from doctors and all. Nobody knew anything. And I came across something online one day about protein, and I think you guys had tried to encourage me to have my macros assessed and all that kind of thing. And I was
Well, you weren't really like tracking.
No, I wasn't tracking at all. Although, given my background, I was always fairly aware of calorie intake, like always doing the numbers in my head and just kind of knowing what I was calorie-wise. And I was very reluctant to do the macro thing because of my background, with food. I didn't want to kind of get into that obsessive compulsive thing about tracking calories or anything else. Finally decided, okay, I'll do that. And I ended up getting some advice from a fellow that you were working with. He was kind enough to help me. And the most shocking thing to me was the amount of protein that I had to start consuming, which seemed like I couldn't believe it. Like I thought we were going to have to start raising chickens.
So what were your macros that do you remember?
When I started with him.
Yeah. And how long ago was that?
It's a few years now, 2 years.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And so my macros at the time, they did continually go up over a period, because I think he started, I was maybe at about like 1900 calories. I don't remember the exact macros, but by the time we finished, because I immediately started losing weight, which I didn't need to do. So they kept increasing. So I think my macros were, give or take now, what I was left at is about 155 protein, 235 to 250 carb, and 55 to 60-ish fat. But I don't live and die by them. I just try to kind of, give or take in and around those areas. But it was the protein that was really hard to. And then, so the other really interesting thing about that, I found absolutely no problem following it. And I was very on top of the calculations and stuff, because I knew Alex was doing it, and the girls would come over to eat, and I was always doing it. So that there was nothing new to that. So it was easy for me to do. But the interesting thing is I've been on medication for high cholesterol for many, many years. And I was on like a really high amount last few years. And the doctors had always said, it's a hereditary type. My dad has it. And the doctors had always said, oh, you eat a pretty decent diet. You exercise a lot. There's nothing more you can do. And about 6 months after I started on the macros, tracking my macros, I probably reduced fat a little bit, reduce carbs maybe a bit, but really increase the protein. I went back and had a check for my cholesterol, and my medication has been cut in half. And there's even areas of my body where I thought it's just kind of, skin from losing weight late in life and being 200 pounds when I was pregnant. And there's areas that went down because my fat profile had been reduced on account of the macro tracking.
Yeah, and you know this because you had bod tests too.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't just, what you thought you looked like. It was actual data.
Yeah.
And I remember you were like, I'm actually gaining muscle. I'm like I'm almost 60 and I'm gaining muscle. And I think you get to a certain age, and we've posted about this before, where we hear, oh, it's, it's just because I'm getting old, or it's because I'm in menopause, but really that's no excuse. It actually isn't an excuse.
Right. Your needs change slightly.
Yeah.
And that's just for people who are aging across the board. That protein needs go up. So a lot of times, really, yes, you should be eating more than 1 gram per pound body weight.
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally. And then as people age, we typically see that their activity level declines. So what happens is you have an aging person who's eating 50 or 60 grams of protein per day, maybe, and they're not doing as much. They're not training. They're sitting around. So what do you think's gonna happen? You're gonna lose a lot of muscle mass. You're gonna start to feel like crap. Your cholesterol profile is gonna go in the wrong direction. So really, it's I think it is slightly more work maybe as you age, because I think there's a tendency to be a little bit less active, but it's if you have those habits in place and you know the right things to do, it's just a matter of making yourself do them.
I think I do more training than an average person my age, and so maybe I can eat a little bit more. I'm not sure. But I totally agree. I don't think that your body definitely changes. I mean, things just hang, and you have more hair growth, all that kind of thing. But your body definitely changes as you age. There's no question about it. And your skin gets, as my 70-year-old friend recently told me, your skin gets very crepey. And I said, well,
great.
Your
really
skin
looking forward to it.
But you do change, but I do agree with you that I don't think that menopause or aging, I think a lot of people, watching a lot of our friends, a lot of people get older, they retire, and they let themselves go. And one other thing that I think is a big deal, especially with retirement, not retirement, but just maybe relaxing a little bit more, is alcohol consumption. And I definitely still consume probably too much. And I was saying to Alex the other day, I think it would make a difference if I cut back on and I do incorporate that into my macros. But alcohol consumption, for me, the macros made me much more very aware of what I was consuming. And so I've definitely reduced that somewhat. And it really makes you aware of what's going in and out.
Yeah. That's one thing that we see when people come to us and they're like, okay, this is what I eat. And you're like, all right, well, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. And then you get to the part of the intake form where it's drinks per week, and it's 8+. And it's okay, so you're actually consuming way more calories than you think. Because most people don't realize how many calories are in alcohol. And that's it's the same thing with juice. It's not just alcohol, it's drinking calories. But alcoholic consumption's a big one.
And it's sugar content, I think, too, right?
Yeah, there's definitely sugar and carbs. And but it's just straight up is just adding to your calorie intake on top of the other, the negative effects of consuming too much alcohol, which are many. But I think, even getting someone to reduce their alcohol intake by half is a big deal, because that's however many calories coming out of your diet. Plus you're going to sleep better. You're going to recover better. You're going to be more likely to be active. Yes, that's a big one too.
I could make a decision to cut back more, but I'm not going to. I think about it a lot.
And that's part of figuring out what your ideal balance is. You also go out for dinners and have, last night we were out and we had French fries, and wine. That's part of it. Just because you're on macros doesn't mean that you can't have that stuff, or you need to be on a tight leash. It's we always preach macros kind of allow for flexibility and balance. So you can kind of accommodate wine whenever you want it to a certain extent.
Well, it's like
and French fries and things like that. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you're gonna have a higher fat dinner. Like we're gonna eat a little fewer carbs at lunchtime
Yeah.
to kind of accommodate. So it's
And
all
also,
about
I like
finding
to
a
pick at
balance.
stuff.
Yeah.
As you know, we come from a food sharing family.
Yeah, I learned
And
that.
So, I insist on eating my husband's crusts and all that kind of stuff. So when I do my macros, I would say on average are around 2,000 calories, 2,100 calories a day. But I always allow, gram or two of fat, a gram or two of carbs, just because I know, and if you guys are over for dinner, we're going to go down and eat frozen cookies. And it just kind of allows a little bit more flexibility. But the other thing on the alcohol, in terms of making you aware, I drink red wine pretty much, that's what I drink. But when we're on holidays, as you know, if we're somewhere hot by a pool or in Hawaii by the ocean, I would drink vodka and Diet 7. My husband was pouring me a couple of drinks starting at 3 p.m. And that after I started doing my macros, I was like, oh my God, and plus we started measuring the amount of vodka. And there was a reason that I, couldn't cook dinner anymore. So it's not to say that I stopped having it, but I'm much more aware now. And so I am definitely having less vodka and thinking longer and harder about it and longer and harder. It's just decision making, really.
Yeah. So why, like, when you're weighing whether or not to have like another glass of wine or to have, 5 glasses of wine a week instead of 10, where, like,
sorry, when did I do that?
I was like, where did you get that number?
I mean, I made it up. I don't actually know. Okay. So instead of drinking like 4 shots of vodka, you drink 2. Like, why did you make, like, why? Like, why are you sacrificing like having fun or enjoying yourself on vacation for what? Like, what is the decision?
Well, no, it's not it's not really sacrificing having fun. It's just, like I say, I became more aware. And when you think about that much alcohol going into your system, it's just not a good thing. And also, so there were times, and Meredith's first experience with me, that, I might have a little too much. And not that often, and that was just, because of the heat of the day. But,
the hot one.
You go to a party or something, and you just kind of let loose, and you drink too much. And honestly, I now know how much difference it's going to make when I go to the gym the next day, and I'd rather feel better doing that stuff than feeling tipsy the night before. And so that
so that was going to be my next question, because we have clients who come to us and we tell them, like, okay, if you want what you want, which is to be leaner, to be healthier, to be fitter, like whatever their goals are, usually along those lines, it requires them to increase protein quite a bit and decrease carbs, decrease alcohol intake. And so they come to us and we say, like, yeah, this is what you're going to need to do. Like, instead of having like popcorn as a snack, like, you're going to need to eat some tuna, tuna on a rice cake or half a sausage. In the morning, you can't just have like, a bagel with peanut butter. You should have a more well-rounded breakfast. And they're like, well, I don't want to have that. Like, it changing their diet like that. Like, I see on the beach, we'll go to the beach and you bring your lunch and it's like, sometimes it's just like chicken or tuna and broccoli. Like, how do you
I might be sacrificing a piece of bread for a vodka.
Yeah.
To be honest.
But some people need to sacrifice, like, change their breakfast or change their lunch. But that they don't want.
Yeah,
like,
we
it's
get
not
like
worth it to them.
they're like, well, like, that's a lot of protein. And it's like, yeah, that's a lot of protein. And so then it becomes like, well, like, how do I do that? What do I eat? And
okay,
it's like,
so the one part of my story that I didn't tell is when I started doing my macros, as you know, literally within a week, things started to change. The inflammation went away. Yeah. And that to me was a huge motivator.
So like just doing it for like a week or two, like to the T, which is pretty much what you did. You follow directions to the T. You notice benefits like within a week. And then I remember you were saying like your hair, it was thicker, like, which are things you need to worry about apparently when you're your age. as you say.
rude.
I don't know. I didn't.
I mean, I
notice.
did wax as soon as I found out we were going to be like visual.
Yeah.
No, your head hair. I thought you said.
Oh,
But,
okay. Well, that too.
so I guess like seeing the physical benefits makes it worth continuing with like changing your diet a little.
It's
Or
just
even
basic-
feeling better.
Feeling
it's
better.
how I felt. I
Yeah.
mean, with the inflammation, and I still get it once in a while if I let myself get run down, but the inflammation, the effect on that was huge. And so if nothing else, even if I go away and I'm not tracking, the one thing that I try to be really conscious about is looking for lean protein, because that to me is like, it's the hardest thing to do, but it has the greatest effect on me. And it takes, so for someone like me to eat 155 grams of protein, it's a lot. But I've just changed my habits, and there are days where I just can't. I just can't. And I might, like, I think actually today I'm probably 130, and I just, cause I don't care, cause I feel kind of fuller.
Yeah.
And so once in a while you're just, but I do try to do it every day. And the protein for me was the hardest thing. And the cat was frightened because he thought he was going to get eaten at one point if we, things ran low in the fridge. But that's the most important thing to me. And it doesn't take that long to get into the habit. And now, for instance, in the mornings, my first breakfast is 150 grams. I do this sort of 5 or 6 days worth. I prepare this. And
Can we talk about what your breakfast is?
so my first breakfast is 150 grams of extra lean beef and sweet potatoes. And
Why? Besides the protein.
Well, it's the protein. Well, because when I was trying to figure out what to have, somebody suggested beef and pumpkin, and I did that for a while, and it was disgusting. And then I did the sweet potatoes, and that way you get some fiber and stuff. And I really look forward to it.
Yeah.
And it's not something I ever would have thought of before, but you have to just find stuff that work. And then second breakfast is kind of like toast and peanut butter, maybe half a banana, jam, always a sausage of some sort. And then sometimes it's oatmeal, depending on where my carbs are for the day. Some days I have like a big bowl of oatmeal with raisins or whatever. And then other than that, I just kind of work around my dinner.
Yeah. That's good. I think a lot of people get hung up eating, they want to eat like traditional breakfast foods where like it doesn't always work out that way. Or even with people that have dietary limitations, which you do. Like people, they can't eat eggs, they don't have dairy, and they're like, well, I'm very limited on what I can have for protein. And I'm like, well, actually you aren't, because you still have, all of the animal sources and the plant sources. You might just have to have a meal that doesn't look like a traditional breakfast meal.
Yeah.
But
and also like eggs, eggs don't sit well with me, but you gotta have a few eggs to make up for like 150 grams of beef. Mm-hmm. Like eggs don't have that much protein.
You'd have to have like 5 eggs, I think, for that.
So you're not really, like the beef really does it. It really gets us started.
when we're together in Maui and you're eating that beef, you're always like, do you guys want a bite?
And I'm like,
We're just
nope.
like, no, I don't want a bite of that. But then I also recommend it to some of my clients. I'm like, hey, like a good option for breakfast is like ground beef or whatever with some sweet potato, because then you get fiber. And a lot of people are very low on fiber. That's just like a very common thing. And nobody has tried it.
Maybe somebody will
Maybe
after they
it's
hear
maybe
this.
A
somebody.
little salt and pepper. That's all it is. I just do the sweet potatoes in the oven or in the microwave and take them out, kind of mash them up. And
Yeah.
works for me.
I think it's one of those things like you do it, and maybe it is a little bit weird, but you do it for a week and you feel better, and you look better, and the scale is doing, whatever the scale is doing. And it's like, oh, okay, you know what? I can do sweet potato and beef for breakfast. That's all right. There are certainly weirder things to eat. There are people who don't eat breakfast, which I think is way worse.
Yeah.
So.
I was that person who I'd like lose it, I'd binge, and then I'd be, I'll start tomorrow. And then, I won't have breakfast. And then by 10 o'clock, you're like,
Okay, actually, I have a good question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but we also get the question, and it's hard for me to speak personally from this because I've never had this problem. I've read some books because, like you mentioned, my sister was going through kind of like binge eating stuff, and I was like, well, why doesn't she just eat like normal meals like I do? Like, why? And so I read some books and kind of learned a little bit about it. But like I get clients who will say like, what do I do in those moments where I just want to eat my feelings? Or like, I can't stop myself, or I've had a really long day and I can't control myself. And like I have things that I've learned, and partially from just talking with clients, what's helped them. So I know what I think I say some helpful things, but like from somebody who's experienced that firsthand, if somebody asks you that question, like what would you do? And you probably feel it still in some scenarios. Like I'm sure it's still a work in progress. Like what would you tell somebody?
Is a bottle of wine and a pack of cigarettes an appropriate answer? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I don't know. With me, like I say, it took a long time. But now, like I mentioned earlier, we happen to have a bag of Lay's potato chips in the basement. And I thought about them today, and I think for me, it's more now that I know how much better it makes me feel to make better decisions. It's just something I do.
And I think being able to make a decision has taken time, and learning, trusting that you have control. Like you do have control.
Yeah, actually.
Like a lot of people think they don't have control, but it's like you just don't know how to use it. You don't know that you're a person who actually can do it. And it takes it takes time and like talking to somebody and recognizing that.
And I think one of the keys, so I'm going to change my answer. It's not how much better I feel. It's how much less shitty I feel. Like I think about back when I used to binge, like really binge. I mean, physically it's disgusting. You feel horrible, and then you feel horrible about yourself, and that's part of the cycle. Like so I can totally relate to that. But I think you just kind of have, I think one of the keys too is self-forgiveness. Like, so if you do go off, like just saying, well, I'm just going to keep doing it and I'll start again tomorrow probably isn't the right thing to do, because, and then you have that like false hunger, you know, when you eat too much and then you wake up the next morning and you're starving. And so that kind of sets you off. But I think kind of forgiving yourself for doing it in the first place. It sounds like I'm not that touchy-feely person. So 20 years ago, I would have thought this was weird for someone to say. But I do think that's a big part of it. A lot of it, I think, for me is emotional and mental, where you just have to say, okay, well, I just, you know, I'm not that bad a person because I ate a bunch of crap. Like it shouldn't define who you are. And also from what I learned about, disordered eating, whether it's binge eating or whatever, well, mostly binge eating. So I'm a person who cannot make myself throw up. So maybe there's a possibility that throughout my, years, I might have become a
bulimic.
Bulimic.
Yep.
So I've learned now when I see young women who are really heavy, or like young girls, teenagers, young women, 20s, or who have are tattooed and stuff, that all is kind of the same thing. Like I'm far less judgmental of it, because it's not always, sometimes it's lack of education, I think, with people who are unhealthily heavy. Part of it, I think, is lack of education, but part of it is it's not about self-discipline. It's about other things. And I wish people would understand that more.
Yeah.
I wish more mothers would understand that. Frankly.
Definitely mothers. And then you see it with people on the internet too. Like there's all these personal trainers and, people who are like, the answer is, eat less than eat less, do more, kind of. It's so simple. It's just math. It's just thermodynamics. And it is that simple when you boil it down to the chemical reactions that are going on. But to just say hey, just eat less, I think it oversimplifies the human aspect of nutrition, and it's insensitive. And you can for sure have a client and you can just get them to eat less and they'll lose weight. But what's going to happen 6 months down the road when they don't know what to do? They're frustrated. They're really hungry because they've been in a calorie deficit for 6 months, and they don't have any support because they're the person that they paid, either a trainer or maybe they got a template online. They don't have any answers. They don't understand that what they're feeling is completely normal and that it's okay.
Yeah. 'Cause I thought I was just I didn't know there were other people like me who just ate ridiculous amounts of food. And it is a hard thing to understand. I think it's a really difficult thing to understand. You studied psychology, and she was raised in the same house. And she said, I remember you said to me once, like intellectually I can understand it, but I don't get how my sister can be like this, or what, because she'd never experienced that. And so I think part of it too is genetic. Like I think some people are just more predisposed, but I just wish people would be at least try to be a little bit more open-minded about it, because at least from my experience, it's not about self-discipline at all. Yeah. Or it might be in some cases, but in a lot of cases, I don't think it is.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Go
ahead.
So just to reiterate, like when you have a bad day, you're saying like, move on. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to feel guilty. Just move on. You don't need to eat less the day after. You don't need to feel guilty or embarrassed. It's just part of it. And if you're working on changing, like you just need to recognize what happened, maybe like what caused it, what you could have done differently, things like that. It's a learning process.
Whatever you do, don't plan on eating
and another
less
thing,
the next day.
Yeah, no, that's the cycle, right?
Another thing is a lot of people move into the next day and they're like, well, I can't have that. I can't do that. Like I'm on a diet, this, that. But instead it's like changing kind of how you see yourself, like your identity, kind of like what you were saying, Mom, when you say, like, I look at myself, I'm like, I'm a person who, values what I can do in the gym, and eating that bag of chips isn't going to make me feel better for my workout tomorrow. Like, it's not that you're a person who can't have something. It's just you're a person who values eating healthy.
Yeah. Other things in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of aspects to it, but
yeah, there's a lot of angles to go at that, I think. But yeah, I think giving yourself a little bit of grace there and having a good support system. I think a lot of people who are that way hide it from other people, and you don't realize, like maybe you don't realize that your best friend is that way too, or your coworker. And if you were just more open with it, then like you'd realize that it is very common, or at least maybe it manifests for other people in different ways. And just having someone that you can talk to about it, I think goes a long way too. Yeah.
So another tough question. For all the moms out there who have young daughters, do you have any advice? Like they're going out into the world with diet culture just in their face. Like you mentioned, with social media just everywhere, high expectations, pressure. What kind of advice, if any, would you give those moms out there who are thinking like, what can I do?
So that's a really tough one. We tried to sell YouTube, but that because it was just getting too hard. No, I think so. I look back at the things I've learned through this, and as I say, for the experience with our other daughter, that's number one that I've learned things from. So I'm as I say, I'm not an expert, but I know a little bit more about this stuff. So I would say really try to stay away from any focus on what you look like. Fat, skinny, all that kind of thing, losing weight. I would just, and especially about yourself, because as much as you think your kids don't pick up on it, I think that they do. So I think that's really important. One of the biggest things that I learned, and again, there's a whole psychology behind it about kids learning to deal with anxiety, stress, all that kind of thing. I think what I've learned, one of the most important things you can do as a parent and as a human being is to acknowledge people's feelings. And so with your kids, if they're crying or whatever, I just don't, from what I know, I don't think it's a good idea to try to suppress that and say, oh, don't be silly and don't cry, or don't be silly, you're not fat, or don't be silly. What are you crying for? I mean, just suck it up and just, and I think that's where a lot of this comes from is that kind of suppression and more anxiety and everything. So as goofy as that probably sounds, like I say, I have learned a lot about it and I've read a lot about it. And I think that's a really important thing. Just so that, and so that kids can, and encourage kids to do things that they can experience accomplishment. It doesn't have to be winning with our kids, but then even that, they were involved.
It was always about winning.
It was,
still is.
But you know, you did lose sometimes,
I
and
know.
those were the best lessons. But with our kids, it was a shock to me because I always thought, you know, I was so excited that they were interested in sports and competition, and I would just never have had the guts to put myself out there and do this stuff. And I thought this would shield them from all of this because, I mean, Alex said she never even thought about what she looked like until she was 20, and yet found out that our younger daughter started, you know, thinking about her body when she was in grade 5. So, you know, I think it's important, whether it's music or just anything where they can feel a sense of accomplishment is important. But I do think you have to really try to just overcome the whole image thing that's out there all the time nowadays, and think about yourself, think about the things you say about yourself in a negative fashion. And it's not always, you know, it's not necessarily, if you weigh 400 pounds, great if you feel great about yourself, but then again, try to encourage. And I think in as much as I wasn't the biggest athlete, I think that just the way you guys grew up, watching Dad run marathons all the time, watching me run some marathons, work out in the basement at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, it probably had an influence on you, and a healthy one to some extent. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think we got a message on Tactic, was it last week, from a mom whose kid, who's like 10-year-old, is into CrossFit or what the hell, Ivy? Okay. I think the cord scared her.
Ivy jumped in, hit her head on the bottom of the table.
She's embarrassed. All right. Well, we got a message from a mom whose kid is into CrossFit and like competitive weightlifting, and she was asking us, you know, I've never had an athlete in the family. Like, what should I do for her nutrition? And like asking us advice on, you know, how her 10-year-old daughter should be eating for her athletics. And I was like,
God.
Okay, your 10-year-old daughter should be eating like a 10-year-old. Like, I wouldn't mention anything at all about nutrition. Like, the worst thing I think you can do for a 10-year-old is to plant the seed of like, you should be concerned with your nutrition. They should be concerned with what they're, you know, what they enjoy doing and doing sport, and they should be spending time with their friends and like, you know, definitely not living in the gym, that kind of thing. And like, she was really receptive to it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I like,
And from an athletic perspective, and you're not asking me this question, but I will add this, that our kids did everything athletic that they could. And I'm not going to take any credit for this. They would glom onto stuff. My husband would sign them up. I would have to drive them. I wasn't a fan. I was an absolute crazy person for years, probably because I was eating 1,200 calories a day. But the sports thing, they both excelled at certain sports. They were both encouraged to focus on those sports alone. They did not, even ski racing. Alex went very far up the ladder, and Evan did too. But we just weren't into that, you know, train in the summer, send them to Europe when they're 12 years old. They did a whole bunch of different sports. They did sports that you do as an individual, sports as a team. So they learned different skills doing those. But if I recall correctly, a few years ago, Alex was on a podcast or something, and she was being interviewed, and they asked her, of all the sports that she did, which sport contributed most to her CrossFit success, and her answer was golfing. And that's because of the mental, you said the mental aspect of it. I don't know if you remember that, and the self-discipline that you have to. So honestly, with kids with sports, I would say just let them do everything. And eventually they might choose one or the other. But even now, as a 30-year-old, like, you guys are doing all kinds of things that you're pretty competent at, and it's fun.
And it's because I think it's from doing a lot of different things as kids, because I was the same way. It wasn't just one sport for, you know, all 4 seasons, and you're just training for that sport in different ways. It was like, okay, in summer we swim, in the fall we're running track and playing basketball or cross country, in the spring it's soccer and track, you know, and indoor swimming. It was as many different things as we could do, which I think not only makes you a better athlete all around, but it's just like, it's good for kids. It helps them develop, I think, and be mentally like,
I agree. There. And as I said earlier, I limited myself to smoking and drinking. And I became very, very competent at those things. I excelled, I have to say. But your dad did a lot of sports, and he was a real, you know, and certainly influenced that. And I think that's a lot healthier than kind of one sport. That's just my opinion.
How did you quit smoking? I
quit once in law school, and I So I did quit, and then I learned from that experience. A year later, I was at a bar with my sister who was a smoker, and had a few drinks and took a puff of hers. And I know now if I ever stick anything lit to my lips again, I will be buying cigarettes the next day. I'm just that kind of a person. But I was smoking when the kids were young. As I said, I didn't smoke when I was pregnant, but smoking right after. And it had so much control of me that I'd be in the kitchen with the window open, like 30 below outside. And it's the smoke's blowing in. And I just felt really guilty. And just the thought of quitting would just put me in such a bad mood. I was so addicted to it. I ended up on the patch. Mm-hmm. That's what I ended up doing. And that year, I trained for my first marathon, and that fall when I went back skiing for the first time since I quit after having trained for a marathon, it was like being in a new body. I could not believe the difference. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It was like I was given a whole new life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Pretty profound.
We went skiing. Meredith got us back into skiing. I was a ski racer, as you probably know or have heard. And I quit when I was 22, right when I finished up at school, and hadn't skied since. And so now it's 7 years later, Meredith wants to go skiing. So we get all the ski gear, and then we get my mom to come with us because she used to be a great skier, and she hasn't skied in what?
Same, 7 years. We all gave it up at the same time.
Did you ski while I was in a lot? I
might have put ski.
I think it may have been like
not.
9 years for you.
Yeah, it could have been longer.
Anyway, we went out last December for the World Cup race just to watch. There was a great powder day. And you were over the moon at how you were like, I feel better and fitter than I did 9 years ago. 9 years ago.
Yeah. I think I feel fitter. There's no question I'm fitter now than I was even 20 years ago.
And you could walk the next day.
Yeah, and I could walk the next day, and I could lower myself onto a toilet seat.
No problem.
All by myself. Yeah, which I never, after a first day of skiing, I could never do. But yeah, the fitness thing is, it's amazing. I'm shocked at how you can actually develop as an older person.
Yeah, you definitely can. You just have to give it the time and dedication. Yeah. I think a lot of people they quit before they really get started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yesterday we were golfing. Meredith.
Okay, so the Parkers are just kind of cut from a different cloth. So, I don't spend a ton of time on my feet. Neither do you. And we golfed a couple weeks ago, 9 holes, and we're like, okay, let's do 18. I'm not a great golfer, but I'll go. And so the plan was to walk the front 9 and then get a cart for the back 9, which seemed like a super reasonable plan to me. And so we're on I actually think it was hole 9. No, it must have been hole 8 because you called. And I heard the murmurs. I heard them start. And it was like, do you guys want to walk the back 9? What do you think about walk the back 9? We'll just ask Meredith if she wants to walk the back 9.
Because we're carrying our bags.
Yeah,
too.
and it's not like we're not on trolleys, our bags on our back. So you're carrying a load. And so of course Alex is like, hey, I think we're going to walk the back 9. Is that okay? And I was like, I mean, y'all are ridiculous. But and that was the day I knew that today. I knew Sunday was it was going to be a write-off day. I was like, yeah, sure. My feet are fucked. But whatever. They can't get worse. And actually, we decided it would have been worse to get into a cart because then you realize how messed up your feet are. Yeah. So that was, and then, so another story along the same lines was Maui this year when somehow, by some miracle, I was the only one not injured, which is, I don't think ever happened before. But so we were there for the first day and it was fine. And then second or third day, your hip got hurt. Alex's hip was hurt. Brenda's back was injured and Garth was literally
waiting for back surgery.
Yeah, he was fresh off back surgery, right, just cleared for running. So the first couple of days, Garth is running to the CrossFit gym, a minute on, minute off, but not supervised. So you can assume that the intensity was probably a little too high. Alex has a bum hip. And then you're like, no, I think you can't even stand up straight. But I think I can deadlift. I'm going to tell Mike to not chill. I'm not going to tell Mike. I don't want my programming to change. And I'm like, this is a family of psychopaths. So it's definitely, that was funny yesterday because it reminded me of Maui. And then I remember the story about how you used to go to hot yoga and then or work out, then go to hot yoga and then go play golf. And I was like, how did you do that?
Well, and then the first few years in Maui, Alex was up at 5. Up, everybody! We've got to be at the gym at 6:30.
God. Yeah. So.
We didn't call it vacation. It was called boot camp back then.
Yeah.
I've eased up on them a little.
Yeah, we sleep in until like 5:30 now. But anyways, I think this has been good. Then we want to do some. I forgot to get the rapid fire questions ready. But we did the parenting one, so that's good.
We can alternate. I can come up with some on the spot.
Okay, you go then.
All right.
I'm not good at. I have to answer.
Yeah,
rapid
you do.
fire.
We'll just do a few. Okay, favorite lift in the gym.
How rapid do I have to be?
Oh, you get a second.
Probably squat. Oh, squat clean for sure.
Okay. Nice.
What's your favorite meal? Like, if you had to pick a cheat meal, what would that meal be?
A cheat meal. Something with like bad fries. A burger and fries, probably. Like a restaurant burger and fries.
Yeah.
What kind of like food prep and stuff
do I do for you?
No, like what do you cook? Like what do your meals look like for lunch and dinner?
So for
what's
lunch,
your favorite kind of way to eat?
Well, so for lunch, sometimes I just have leftovers, and I like to keep chicken in the freezer to do like I'll just throw like whatever for lunch. Lunch is kind of the last meal that I do based on the rest of my day. And then dinners, I usually do a dinner, unless it's like a barbecue or something, I usually do a dinner that makes 6 meals so that your father and I can have one like one day and then 2 days later, and then I can bring one to you guys.
Which we like.
Yeah, very appreciative.
So I usually cook like that, and then you guys come over on Sundays, like tonight's stir fry. And
if you want a recipe book that's great, very healthy, kind of lower fat, easy to fit into macros and actually have macros, we highly recommend Looney Spoons. My mom cooks from that book a lot.
Yeah, it's a good one. The Indianapolis 500. It's one of my favorites.
And Nutcracker is good.
Nutcracker,
easy.
Yeah. So what competitions are you doing in 2021 season?
Oh, I wish. I do my competitions in my head.
That's okay.
Sometimes
that
I get
works.
programming and I lose sleep.
Yeah.
And I said to Alex, sometimes I'm driving to the gym and I get butterflies in my stomach because it's a tester, and it's like I have to remind myself I'm not on my way to the CrossFit Games, and nobody really cares except Alex pretends to, and I always text her instantly if it's a good result.
Yeah. I think Mike likes it.
Yeah.
He certainly gets a chuckle sometimes.
Oh, one more?
Yeah.
What is your favorite part about getting older?
My saggy breasts. No, wait, my saggy ass. My favorite. Oh, actually, no, honestly. So I think this was part of my transformation in my 50s. I don't know if you remember, but I remember 50 being my favorite birthday ever. And I believe, especially as a woman, that getting older, you have a sense of freedom. Like you start not caring as much and you just have more, not even confidence in yourself. It's just kind of like, whatever. It's just a better feeling.
Yeah.
It's just, you're not as self-conscious about things, and it's just, you've done things and you just kind of, you're ready to move on. And that, yeah, I have to say, especially I think as a female. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, this has been great. This is a really good first podcast back, so I think people are going to like it. So thanks for letting us use your kitchen table. And I know it was long, but I think it was good.
Yeah, we better let her go so she can make us dinner.
Alex is getting hungry, so we got to go. Yeah, but thanks a lot.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, if you want to follow Brenda, her handle is at Alex's mom, Brenda, on Instagram. So follow along there. There's some good cat and gym stories that go up for sure. So cool.